It's now my privilege to introduce our closing speaker for this first day of ALPA's Air Safety Forum. First confirmed in 2017 by the U.S. Senate as the 7th Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration, Administrator David Pekoske was reconfirmed for a second term as Administrator in September of 2022. He leads a workforce of more than 60,000 employees and is responsible for security operations at nearly 440 U.S. airports. Before joining the TSA, Administrator Pekoske was an executive in government service industry where he provided counterterrorism, security, and intelligence support services to government agencies. In addition, he served as the 26th Vice Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. During his tenure as TSA Administrator, the TSA has improved transportation security through closer partnership and alliances, a culture of innovation, and development of a dedicated workforce. He's demonstrated his commitment to strengthening partnerships during his many meetings with the ALPA pilots and his inclusive approach to advancing aviation security. As we heard during the previous panel, our success couldn't be more important, particularly at a time when passengers are returning to the skies in record numbers. Please join me in welcoming Transportation Security Administration Administrator David Pekoske.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be here, and Captain Ambrosi, I really appreciate the invitation to join you for this Air Safety Forum and to continue the great dialogue, as you mentioned, that we've had between ALPA and TSA. And it's a dialogue that I find particularly beneficial. I hope you do as well. We are aligned completely on our goal to make sure that aviation stays as safe and secure as it possibly can be. And I'll talk about some of the issues that we're jointly facing over the next probably 15 minutes or so, and then I'll open up hopefully the second half of my time slot to any questions that you might want to ask me. I would start out just by reflecting at this point in time that, hey, this is a conference we're having on 9/11 week. We have a ceremony in TSA headquarters every year on 9/11, doesn't matter whether it's a Saturday or Sunday or a Tuesday, to reflect on what happened that day and to think about the role that TSA has to make sure that it never happens again. In TSA, we have a credo that goes, not on my watch, and we reinforce that all the time with our workforce, that each one of us, in whatever position we have in the agency, our goal is to make sure that the system stays secure from a terrorist attack, and we don't want anything that would even threaten that to occur on our watch. The other thing that we reinforce is how much 9/11, as tragic as it was when 19 people killed 2,977 people over the course of less than an hour and a half, no matter how tragic it was, it did bring the country together. And I stand here as the administrator of the agency that was created as a direct result of 9/11, and as a result of congressional action in just 69 days, we have a set of authorities and a set of responsibilities that I think has served us especially well over the last 22 years, and I anticipate that it will for the next many years ahead. The other thing that I would reflect on just standing here in this hotel is this is where, as many of you know, the Chicago Convention was convened in 1944. That really was the baseline establishment for the International Civil Aviation Organization, an organization that began with 52 members and now has grown to 193. So a 4 times growth over that period of time, has done incredible work in aviation safety and I think has done incredible work in aviation security. I pledge to the Secretary General and to the Council President that we will do everything we can to be strong participants in ICAO process, in their process of not just developing standards and recommended practices for aviation security, but also in helping other countries develop aviation security systems that would meet the ICAO standards going forward. And so I think it's very appropriate that you're having this particular conference in this particular hotel during this week. I listened a bit to the prior panel, and I'd like to recognize Wolfgang Koch, who's also a member of our Aviation Security Advisory Committee. Has a great voice and a great sense of humor in that committee, and really contributes substantially to represent and reflect the perspectives of you, the members of ALPA. And Wolfgang, I really appreciate your contributions to ASAC, and look forward to continued great work on your part representing ALPA going forward. When we had the other panel up, we talked a little bit about the threat and how the threat has changed, and I'd like to touch on that for just a minute. You know, I think a lot of people, not in this audience necessarily, but in the country, when they listen to the news and they read about ISIS being on retreat, Al-Qaeda being a very small shell of what it used to be, that the international terrorist threat is something we don't have to worry about anymore. And I would disagree with that completely. You know, I would say that at this point in time, the threat is actually more concerning, not just from the international dimension, but from the domestic dimension, and importantly from the cyber dimension. As many of you may know, we just issued amendments to aviation, airport and airline security plans, security programs that requires certain efforts on the part of the owners and operators of the systems to improve their cybersecurity preparedness and, importantly, their cybersecurity resilience. And I would just highlight that for you for a second, just to give you a sense of a change in approach that we have made, and it will manifest itself in the years going forward, is we've determined that rather than being very specific in our regulatory actions, we would rather be focusing on outcome achievement and allowing owners and operators to tailor the measures that they put in place based on their own business model to achieve the outcomes that we've established. But the very important part of this is that with outcome achievement, it cannot be a guess as to whether or not we're achieving the outcomes that we desire to achieve. But we have to be able to look at data and ascertain objectively and similarly across all the owners and operators in a transportation subsector as to how they're doing with outcome achievement. The reason I like performance-based rulemaking is it gives us more flexibility. It also means that the adversary, if they ever got a copy of the requirements that we put in place, could not cookie cut an attack across the entire subsector, because everybody's going to be doing it a little bit differently. Additionally, particularly with cyber, the technology is changing greatly. The standards for providing cybersecurity protections are changing greatly, and we want to keep pace with the time and not have to redo our requirements every year or so to keep pace with where adversary capability is. And the key thing to keep in mind with this is, you know, the adversary is just not a criminal actor. The adversary are nation states, and that's a threat of a whole different scale than we've encountered before. The prior panel on unruly passengers, that's something that I am very concerned about, both in flight and in our checkpoint operations. And we have certainly seen a sustained level of unruly passenger activity. And I would define unruly because I think you just need to focus on where the unruly behavior is most impactful, and that is on unruly passengers who engage in physical assault. I can tell you from my time as the administrator, now going on 6+ years, in the very first part of my term, if I read an operations summary from the day before, I would have to read over literally probably 6 months worth of reports where I would see an assault situation occur in an aircraft in flight. Now, it's almost every single day. And there are examples of this that we heard from the prior panel. Just rest assured that the federal agencies involved, which is primarily in this case the FAA, but also TSA, also the Department of Justice and the FBI, we are doing everything we can to hold those individuals accountable for that behavior. And I'll just give you a couple things that TSA does in particular on this. First, a good portion, not a majority, but a good portion of unruly passengers are trusted travelers. They're pre-check passengers. Once we see unruly behavior involving an assault, a passenger will lose that trusted traveler status for 5 years. And if you're not a trusted traveler, you won't be able to apply for a trusted traveler program for 5 years. And so you can imagine that if you're a pre-check passenger and you're now back in the standard lanes as a result, that's something that you're going to remember every day for the 5 years that you travel. The other thing that we do is we impose a civil penalty after an investigation to ascertain the facts and make sure a civil penalty is appropriate. That civil penalty can go up to $15,000, which is not necessarily the number I would pick if I could pick a number, but it's the maximum limit within our regulatory authority for this particular offense. Finally, we have found unruly passengers, particularly in the checkpoint, particularly in large airports where there are multiple checkpoints, will engage in unruly behavior at one checkpoint. Police will come over, remove them from the checkpoint, escort them out the door. They will find their way into another door and approach a different checkpoint. And so we have a process now where we give them selectee status instantly. So no matter where they go in that airport or a nearby airport like Midway to O'Hare, or Reagan Airport to Dulles, or Dulles to BWI, that we can ensure that on that particular day they're not going to fly, and they can try again the following day, but we have a process to make sure that we don't see them in another checkpoint on the same day. Closely related to unruly behavior is firearms detections. And firearms detections, the numbers that I'll give you, I think are pretty alarming. Last calendar year, we had 6,542 firearms detections in our screening checkpoints. That's a big number. That's the biggest number we've ever had in our history. The concerning part of this is that 88% of those firearms were loaded. Now, if I look forward to where I think calendar year 23 will end up, based on the current level of firearms detections, we will probably exceed that number by about 200 cases. So, probably 6,700 firearms detections in our screening checkpoints. But here's a troubling trend: is that the percentage that are loaded this year is 93% versus 88%. I think more than 2% is too high. So, same process for us is, firearm at a checkpoint, no longer a trusted traveler if you were not eligible, if you were not currently a trusted traveler, a fine, law enforcement action depending on the jurisdiction, and additional screening for that particular encounter. Serge Potapov mentioned the FAMS roadmap that we just published, and I think it's important for a federal agency, even a security agency like us, to be as public and as transparent as we can be, but recognize that there are some things that we can't be totally public on. I mean, there's a lot of sensitive information that we deal with, but we put out this Federal Air Marshal Service roadmap. It's posted on our public-facing webpage. It really is a direct result of two things. The threat change that I mentioned, we need to change with the threat and make sure that we're meeting the threat where it is. And the second is a desire to further integrate our law enforcement operations and TSA with our screening operations. When I first came into this job, the screening system would screen a selectee to screening standards, but there wasn't a handoff of that selectee to the flight that person was on. And it's all within the same agency. So part of the roadmap will further institutionalize that change we made several years ago. I thank all of you for your support of the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, one of the most successful programs that we have. It's in its 20th year. It just had its 20th anniversary this past spring. It costs us less than $25 to support a federal flight deck officer deployment. That includes all the training costs and the cost of the equipment. Incredibly cost effective, incredibly important to have that additional layer of protection, particularly given what I've just talked about with the threat and with some passenger behavior. The FFDO program is the world's largest in-flight security program. I'm very eager to build that program back up to where it was in pre-pandemic days, and I think we're on a good path to do that. And to make sure, too, that when we renegotiate federal air marshal agreements internationally, we have agreements with many, many countries that allow our federal air marshals to carry arms into those countries and store those arms before they depart on their departure flight. We call this harmonization with the Federal Air Marshal Service agreements and bringing FFDO authorization into that as well. It's just a huge force multiplier for us, and in my discussions with my counterparts internationally, they are welcome and open to that idea as we renew these agreements. So just thank you for the work as FFDOs and to the companies for their support of the program. Other thing is passenger volumes. I mean, this has been the busiest summer TSA has ever had in its history. If you think about it for a second and just average it across Memorial Day to Labor Day, the average was 2.5 million passengers every single day. We had one day that is the second busiest in TSA history, and that was the Friday before the 4th of July weekend. That was 2.88 million passengers. The highest day to date still is the Friday before, the Thursday before, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, pre-pandemic in 2019. So I expect that when we get to Thanksgiving this year, we might break the 3 million passenger mark for that particular day. Wanted to update you on airport worker screening. We just issued an amendment to airport security plans that requires airports now to do a certain base level of worker screening, separate from the screening that's done in the screening checkpoints. I can't go into a lot of details in this forum as to what the requirement is in specifics, but I just wanted you to know as pilots that we are, because of the insider threat that we're seeing, we are putting that requirement on airports around the country. Cat 1, Cat X, Cat 2 airports, no Cat 3s or 4s at this particular time, but we've signaled that we intend to proceed with Cat 3s and 4s as well at a future date. This will be implemented over the coming year. We talked about ICAO at the beginning. This is a reflection of an ICAO requirement to do 100% staff screening. We don't agree with 100% staff screening given the other measures that we do that we feel compensate for the requirement to do 100% staff screening. But we do agree that some level of staff screening is necessary, and we put that requirement in place. In the KCM program, I know that's an area of concern for all of you. We're on a good path, I think, with the KCM program. We're already doing some initial work on what the next generation KCM looks like, just from hey, what capability does this program need to have? We had an update with ALPA, I believe, on the 31st of August, and there have been quarterly updates. This is one of the quarterly updates that we've had. When I was with you last year, I promised you that you would have a seat at the table as we design the system, when we get down to the final design of the system. When I say final, it doesn't mean that we've already put it together and now it's just in the last stages. How do you think about this? I mean, once we get past, hey, what capabilities does it need to have when we get into design, you will be at the table to help us design this system. I think that's critically important for its future success, and I appreciate your patience as we've gone through this KCM transition process. I also envision that, and we'll ask for your input on this, is moving to a biometric identification process for KCMs. I mean, that's where we're going in our checkpoint operations. The capability is there. That might be something, it's certainly more efficient. It's absolutely more effective in terms of its accuracy rate in matching a person with their identity. Just a quick update on unmanned aerial systems. We have been working to try to get permanent authority to do UAS work. Right now we have temporary authority that's derivative of the Department of Homeland Security's authority. It only applies in emergency situations. It's really not where we want to be on a long-term basis. There has been an interagency agreement that's been in place now for 3 or 4 years, where the FBI, FAA, and TSA and DoD came together, and we tried to determine, hey, what would be the concept of operations for counter-UAS operations in the United States, particularly in the core 30 airports. And then secondly, given that, which agency would be the lead federal agency? As a result, we developed a concept of operations, and that concept of operations calls for TSA to be the lead federal agency. We need the authority in law to be able to do that. And so we're hoping that we get at least an extension of the current authority we have, which is going to expire, or new authority that gives us specific authority for counter-UAS and removes the emergency situation restriction that's in there. That's work that we've done significantly up on the Hill. There's a good level of support for this. Quite frankly, UASs have been an issue for a long time. There are a good number of unmanned aerial systems flying in and around airports. When we do our test demonstrations of detect, track, and identify capability, we find where reporting would indicate there might be under 20 UASs in operation, we find literally hundreds are in operation. So this is something we really need to focus on because time, I don't think, is on our side with this. We have done a lot of work on crew member self-defense training, primarily for the cabin crew. This has been really well received. We now do it at 20 different sites. It is free to them. We are working very hard to go to where they are and to their training sites rather than having them come to our sites to make this as accessible as we possibly can. It's been really well received by the flight attendants in general. Final couple of things. Just for your awareness, you probably know that when passengers buy a plane ticket, they pay a 9/11 security fee. That's been in place for a good number of years. It's $5.60 one way, $11.20 round trip. That fee goes into a fund that offsets the appropriation for TSA to conduct our aviation security work. Back in 2013, there was an agreement in the bipartisan budget agreement that passed when it was end of the fiscal year, sort of like what we're facing now. How do we reach an agreement as to how we're going to establish budget limits for the federal government? That agreement called for a diversion of some of those passenger fee revenues to the Department of Treasury solely for the purpose of deficit reduction. Right now, if you look at the next fiscal year 24, $1.6 billion of fee collections for the 9/11 security fee have no purpose attached to them for aviation security. They go to deficit reduction. And so one of the things that we have been advocating for a couple of years now, the President has put it in the budget twice now, is that we end the diversion and return those funds as an offsetting collection to TSA's appropriation. It would give us more top line to be able to do the important work that we do. We have been working on one-stop security agreements. We've gotten authorization from the Congress to do prototype testing on 6 last point of departure airports over the course of 6 years. No limit on the domestic receiving airports for this program. We've made a lot of progress on this. I will tell you, without going into details of the airports or the countries involved, we have learned a lot in our own security operations, and our partner countries have learned a lot. We have identified 13 last point of departure airports as candidates. This is based on a whole set of factors, but key among them is the agreement of the host country and the host airport to provide the resources to be able to execute one-stop security. Basically, this stands for achieving security comparability for flights that leave an LPD destined for the United States, which will increase the level of security for inbound flights into this country and certainly facilitate travel in our major hub airports. And the last thing I would highlight for you is we do have an air cargo security roadmap. Air cargo security is critically important. It's an area that we have tried to highlight. We have a number of recognition agreements with countries around the world. We want to continue to raise the level of air cargo security. It's gotten a lot more complicated, of course, over the last several years, and we thought it was important to get all the stakeholders together and represent in that roadmap kind of a sense from the stakeholder group and the government agencies involved as to where we think we ought to move with respect to air cargo security. Again, publicly posted, fully transparent to everybody. I will close and then open it up for questions with this thought is that the theme of your conference is moving forward together. We can't do what we need to do, any of us in this room, unless we work together to get it done. I really thank you for your partnership in that regard and for your continuing partnership going forward. I hope you find that I am personally receptive to the input you provide, as is my team, and we really value all of you as partners in aviation security. So thank you for that.
Well, awesome. I really appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Captain.
Thank you
I
again
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Round of
Thanks,
applause
everybody.
for